So I'd like to tell you about my experience of childbirth. So around 7 years ago was the birth of my first son. And when I started to show signs of being pregnant, me and my husband were both excited to learn whether the baby is hearing or deaf. Both me and my husband are deaf, and so are all my family, whereas only one member of his family is deaf, which is a brother, and all the rest are hearing. So we were excited to know what the baby would be. But obviously we had to wait the 9 months or 40 weeks to find out. During this time, we regularly went to the GP every month. This was so the GP could check on the health of the baby and make sure everything was alright. For example, that they could hear the baby's heartbeat. At that time we didn't actually have an interpreter, so we'd communicate by passing notes backwards and forwards, but she was a lovely woman. I felt I got the support I needed in things like what to eat and stuff like that. So as the time drew closer, at around 20 weeks, we went to New Cross Hospital, which is in Wolverhampton. And we went there for the 20-week scan to see the baby. So I had the scan, and the doctor asked, would you like to know the sex of the baby? But me and my husband both agreed we'd like it to be a surprise. My husband's actually always wanted a girl. Well, I don't know why, but, there you go. So they showed us a picture of the scan, and there was the baby. Now, around 35 weeks, we went to the GP, and they measured the size of my baby bump. There was a little bit of concern there because it seemed like the bump had grown a lot from only the week previous, so they sent us back to New Cross Hospital to check on the baby again. And when we got there, they scanned us again, or scanned me again, and said there's nothing to worry about, it's just a bit of a communication breakdown. No, it's fine. So, my 20-week scan, I remember looking at that and you could clearly see the baby in its shape and the little legs kicking and things like that. Whereas when I got my 36-week scan, the baby had grown so large you could barely make out what part of it you were looking at. I didn't really like that, and looking back I think I much preferred the 20-week scan where you could see the full shape, each nuance of the face. But it was interesting nonetheless, and everything was fine. They also gave me the due date, which was the 6th of November 2009. Obviously, that's only an estimation and the baby can come any time around that date. So, as the time grew closer, on the 4th of November, my water broke. I actually had 2 friends visiting me at the time. They were obviously excited, but, I sent them away. So, my husband used the type talk system to let the hospital know that my wife's waters broke. Obviously, it was our first baby, so we were in a bit of a blind panic, but he let them know that my water broke. They asked how long the contractions were between each other, and he told them how long, and they said, no, don't worry about it. Just wait. So around 4 hours later, we rang them again and they called us in, so we packed our bags and went. They checked me over and said that I'd not dilated enough and sent me back home. I was a bit shocked by that the baby was coming and they were sending me back home, but I agreed and went back home. I had an absolutely awful night that night though. I was tossing and turning, up and down. I had the worst headaches. I felt like someone was ripping my ponytail out of my head. It was horrible. So, my husband phoned the hospital again and said, look, she's really uncomfortable, And they said, well, come in then. So we went back to the hospital and they checked inside. But that showed that I'd only actually dilated 1 inch. Which meant over 12 hours of extreme discomfort, not much had changed. They told me that I couldn't go home now and I had to stay in the hospital. I had a few tablets, painkillers and things like that. And then the midwife came in. Unfortunately, my contractions had started to slow down. but they gave me something to help induce the contractions. When I took that, the contractions started in earnest and it was extremely uncomfortable. Later on, they asked me if I'd like an epidural, and I agreed. They told me when they were giving me the epidural that I had to stay incredibly still and not move, not kick and scream. This made me extremely nervous. And they told me the effects of the epidural was that it sort of feel like I was paralysed and things like that. I was extremely nervous about it, but when they gave it to me, it was bliss. It was like all the pain had just been released. It was amazing. There was a lot of confusion in the hospital, and I was sort of relying on my husband to be there for me, but he was, so that was great. So every 4 hours they checked, but unfortunately I'd only dilated 2 inches, which it just wasn't enough, and that was in 25 hours. So obviously during all this time I couldn't go anywhere or do anything because of the epidural, so I was just lying in bed, maybe reading a book or talking, things like that. The doctor came in around 35 hours later and checked all my charts and the heart monitor and things like that. I saw there was a lot of talking going on around between the medical staff. Obviously, me and my husband are deaf, so we didn't really know what was going on, and it was more than a one-to-one conversation. There was lots of people discussing the case, so it made me very nervous. When they did tell us what was going on, it turns out the baby's head was not going through the opening correctly. So what the doctor had to do was reach inside and push the baby's head back up, so the baby would be in the right position to then come out in a normal way. So the doctor tried this, which was extremely uncomfortable, as you can imagine. I think he must have tried it about 10 times, and I was getting, rather annoyed and embarrassed and things like that. And it was unsuccessful. This was why I kept trying. After about 50 hours, they decided that wasn't going to work, and decided to perform a caesarean section on me. So they performed that and took the baby out of me, and it came out on exactly the 6th of November. Which, if you remember, was my due date, so it's absolutely perfect. The weight of the baby was 9 pounds 1 ounce, which is big for a baby. I gave him the name Keo, Langard, which is my surname, and Tang, which is my husband's name. Now my son's 7, and he's a lovely boy. He's hearing, actually. But, what can you do? It's good, though, because he now fully understands both sign language and English.